Hello everyone and welcome to my channel YNR Trends. The war that had torn Genoa City piecemeal for months didn't end with explosions or bloodshed, but with a single ruinous act of treason that echoed louder than any projectile, because when Jack Abbott eventually stood face to face with Victor Newman in the dimly lit corridors of Newman Enterprises, the weight of every secret, every taradiddle, and every life destroyed by Matt's ruthless crusade hung thick in the air, and in that moment Jack knew there was no turning back, no further half measures, no further silent deals, because the monster they had unleashed could only be stopped one way. And so with a clenched jaw and a heart heavy with remorse, Jack ordered his men to bring Matt forward, bound, bruised and broken, his formerly arrogant eyes now burning with unbelief as he realized the war he allowed he was winning had ended in his complete and maximum defeat, and as Victor sluggishly rose from behind his office, his presence commanding the room like a storm about to strike, Jack's voice cut through the silence like a blade, publicizing that Matt was no longer his problem, no longer his adversary, but Victor's internee, and in that moment the balance of power in Genoa City shifted ever, because Matt had spent months manipulating families, destroying alliances and turning family against family, induced that no one could touch him, that his shadow conglomerate would remain retired behind layers of deception. Yet then he was exposed and defeated, his wrists bound, his pride shattered, and his fate now in the hands of the most dangerous man in city, while Victor's eyes lustered with cold satisfaction, not because he'd won, but because he'd eventually been given the occasion to make an illustration of the man who dared challenge his reign. And as Jack stepped back, watching the consequences of his decision unfold, a storm of feelings raged inside him, because handing Matt over to Victor meant sealing his adversary's fate in a way no court of law ever could. Yet it also meant accepting the blood that would inescapably stain his own heart, and as Matt plotted against the guards, his voice cracking as he cried that Jack was making a mistake, that Victor would destroy him, that the war wasn't truly over, Jack said nothing, because deep down he knew the verity this war could only end with one man standing, and it was no way going to be Matt, while Victor circled his new internee like a bloodsucker, reminding him of every crime, every treason, every innocent life that had been shattered by his ambition. And with each word Victor spoke, Matt's confidence atrophied further because for the first time, he was no longer the one pulling the strings, and the consummation that his power was gone hit him harder than any physical blow ever could. And as Victor ordered his men to take Matt down to a place no bone would ever find him, the futurity of the moment settled over the room like a burial cloak, because this wasn't justice, it was commodity far darker, commodity born of revenge, and Jack felt it in his bones, yet he didn't stop it. Because too numerous people had suffered, too numerous families had been torn piecemeal, and too numerous lives had been ruined by Matt's war to allow mercy now. And as the guards dragged Matt toward the elevator, his eyes locked onto Jack's one last time, filled with a blend of abomination, fear, and bitter understanding, because he knew Jack had just come the man he formerly despised, a man willing to cross any line to cover what he loved. And when the doors eventually closed, sealing Matt's fate, the silence that followed was blaring, broken only by Victor's low, satisfied voice declaring that Genoa City would eventually know peace again. Yet Jack knew peace would come at a terrible cost, because the war had ended, but the scars it left before would no way truly heal, and as he walked down from Newman Enterprises that night, the megacity lights reflecting off his haunted eyes, Jack couldn't escape the verity. Occasionally palmed as ent feel like winning at each, it feels like losing a part of your soul ever, because the war may have ended, Matt may now be Victor's internee, but the price of that ending would hang Genoa City for generations to come. The night Matt came Victor Newman's internee, Genoa City didn't celebrate. It held its breath because everyone could feel it in the air, that uneasy silence that comes after a storm when the destruction is too fresh to be called calm. And as the megacity lights lustered against the black sky like distant stars that no longer felt comforting, Jack Abbott stood alone on the rooftop of Genoa, gaping into the darkness, replaying the moment over and over in his mind, the moment he'd crossed a line he could no way uncross, the moment he'd handed a mortal life into the hands of a man who believed mercy was weakness and revenge was justice. And no matter how numerous times Jack told himself it was necessary, that Matt had to be stopped, that too numerous lives had formerly been ruined by his schemes, the weight of what he'd done pressed against his casket like a crushing force, because Jack had always believed he was different from Victor, that he fought with integrity while Victor ruled with fear, yet now he wasn't so sure presently, because the echoes of Matt's hopeless voice still chimed in his cognizance, and deep down Jack knew that formerly Victor Newman took control of someone's fate. There was no turning back. Far below, in a hidden underground installation known only to Victor's most pious men, Matt sat manacled to a cold sword president, the dim light fluttering above him like a dying twinkle. His formerly proud posture now drooped under the weight of prostration and unbelief, because for the first time in his life, he wasn't the architect, he wasn't the one pulling the strings, he wasn't untouchable presently, and as heavy steps echoed through the concrete corridor, Matt's head snapped up, his eyes burning with a blend of rage and fear, because he knew exactly who was coming, and when Victor Newman eventually stepped into the room, his presence alone felt like a verdict, his expression calm, controlled, and terrifyingly confident, the face of a man who had formerly decided Matt's fate long before the first word was spoken. "You allowed. You could outwit me," Victor said sluggishly, his voice low and murderous. "You allowed. You could tear piecemeal my family, my conglomerate, and walk down like nothing happened." He circled Matt like a bloodsucker, every step deliberate, every pause heavy with imminence. "But men like you always forget one thing." Victor stopped directly in front of him, locking eyes. "No bone wins a war against Victor Newman." Matt laughed. A broken, bitter sound. "You didn't win," he shot back. "Jack did your dirty work. Without him you had nothing." Victor's lips coiled into a thin, dangerous smile. "Jack made a choice. You made an adversary." The silence that followed felt endless, stretching until Matt's confidence eventually cracked, and in that moment, he realized this wasn't about justice or indeed vengeance. This was about control, because Victor didn't just want Matt penalized, he wanted him cancelled, and as Victor gestured to his men, the chains tensed around Matt's wrists, the reality of his situation crashing down like a tidal surge, because the war was over, but his agony was just beginning. Meanwhile, back in Genoa City, the ripple effects of Jack's decision spread through every family like shockwaves after an earthquake, because peace nowhere comes without consequences, and the price of ending one war frequently sparks another, and nowhere was that further apparent than in the halls of Jabot, where whispers followed Jack like murk, workers glancing at him with an admixture of respect and fear, because the man they formerly saw as the moral compass of the business world had proven he was willing to play Victor Newman's game when pushed far enough, and while some respected his strength, others wondered what line he'd cross next. Phyllis still saw the verity written all over Jack's face, because when she set him up alone in his office, gaping blankly at the megacity skyline, she didn't see a victorious leader. She saw a man visited by his own choices. "You did what you had to do," she said vocally, trying to assure him. "Matt was dangerous. People could have failed." Jack didn't turn around. "People did die," he replied still. "And now I've handed someone differently's life over to a man who doesn't believe in mercy. That makes me no more than Matt." Phyllis stepped closer, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You're not Victor. And you're not Matt. You're Jack Abbott. You defended your family." Jack eventually looked at her, his eyes filled with conflict. At what cost? Across city, Victor's family felt the impact of his rearmost palm in veritably different ways, because while some saw it as a necessary end to a dangerous chapter, others stressed what it revealed about the man they loved, and Nikki, standing in the living room of the estate, goggled at Victor like she was seeing him for the first time, because the cold certainty in his eyes told her that Matt's fate was formally sealed, and no quantum of contending would change it. "You promised me," Nikki said, her voice pulsing. "You promised this would end without further blood on your hands." Victor didn't blench. "It will," he replied. "My hands are clean. Jack made the choice. Matt chose the war. But you're the one finishing it," Nikki rumored. Victor's silence was all the answer she demanded. Away, the youngest generation felt the shock in ways no bone anticipated. Because Kyle, Summer, and indeed Adam all tasted that commodity abecedarian had shifted in Genoa City's power structure, and when rumors spread that Matt had dissolved without a trace, fear replaced festivity, because no bone knew what Victor had planned, only that whatever it was, it wouldn't be gentle, and when Adam brazened his father directly, demanding answers, Victor simply said, "Some wars end still. Others end permanently." Adam's jaw tensed. And what if Jack regrets it? Victor's aspect hardened. Remorse doesn't change reality. But reality has a way of unraveling indeed the strongest plans, and just when everyone believed the story was over, a shocking discovery transferred Genoa City into chaos, because a mysterious translated communication surfaced, containing substantiation that Matt had hidden contingency plans, secrets able of destroying both Newman and Abbott conglomerates if they ever came to light, and suddenly the palm Jack and Victor allowed they had secured began to feel dangerously fragile, because Matt, indeed in chains, had left behind a final armament, the Verity. Jack entered the communication late at night, his hands shaking as he read the words, because it wasn't just commercial sabotage Matt had planned, it was particular, explosive, and able of tearing families piecemeal from the inside out. And in that moment Jack realized the war might be over on the face, but under, the damage was still spreading like a slow-burning fire, because some battles don't end when the adversary is captured. They end when the secrets are buried, and Matt had made sure his secrets would no way stay buried. Driven by guilt and despair, Jack went to Victor, demanding they find out what Matt had hidden before it destroyed everything. But Victor, ever the strategist, had his own plan, one that involved silencing Matt permanently, because in Victor's world, the only safe adversary is a silent one. And when Jack realized what Victor was preparing to do, sweat replaced confidence because for the first time, Jack understood the full consequences of the choice he'd made. And the Verity hit him harder than any treason ever could. By handing Matt over, Jack hadn't ended the war. He'd simply changed the battleground. In the underground installation, Matt tasted the shift before anyone differently did, because when the guards returned, their expressions darker than ahead, he knew the timepiece was running out, and with one final act of defiance, Matt revealed he'd one last move left, one secret that could bring Victor Newman to his knees. And as the pressure reached its breaking point, the question that visited everyone in Genoa City came insolvable to ignore: was the war truly over, or had it only just begun? Because in Genoa City, peace is no way endless, power is no way secure, and palm always comes with a price. No one in Genoa City expected the war's true ending to come not from Victor Newman's iron grip or Jack Abbott's tortured conscience, but from the one person everyone trusted the most, because while the city believed Matt was broken, silenced, and powerless in Victor's underground prison, the truth was far more dangerous, far more twisted, and far more personal, and the betrayal that followed would rip through families, alliances, and loyalties like a blade through glass, leaving nothing untouched in its wake, because the real enemy had been hiding in plain sight all along. Jack Abbott had barely slept since handing Matt over, his nights haunted by visions of locked doors, echoing screams, and the unbearable weight of knowing he had crossed a line that could never be erased. And when he received a sudden call from Newman Security requesting an urgent meeting, his stomach tightened, because something in his gut told him this wasn't about business, it was about consequences. And as he arrived at the ranch under the cover of darkness, the silence felt wrong too. Quiet, too controlled, like the calm before a devastating storm. And when Victor led him into a private room, Jack immediately sensed the tension in the air, thick with secrets that had yet to be spoken. "He's not talking," Victor said flatly. "But I know he's hiding something." Jack folded his arms. "Then why am I here?" Victor's eyes narrowed. "Because someone on the inside is helping him." The words hit Jack like a punch to the chest. "Helping Matt?" Jack whispered. "That's impossible." Victor slid a tablet across the table. "Watch." The footage that played next shattered every sense of certainty Jack had left, because the grainy security video showed a woman entering the underground facility late at night, her face partially hidden, her movements confident, deliberate, and familiar, and when she turned toward the camera, the truth struck with brutal force. It was Phyllis Summers. Jack's breath caught in his throat as the image froze on her face, her eyes cold, focused, nothing like the woman who had comforted him, reassured him, and convinced him he had done the right thing, because the woman in that footage wasn't a concerned ally, she was a conspirator. "That's not possible," Jack whispered. "She was with me. She supported my decision." Victor's voice was ice. "She supported you, not the decision." The footage continued, showing Phyllis slipping a small device into the guard system, disabling surveillance, and entering Matt's cell alone, and the final audio clip was even more devastating, because her voice, calm and controlled, whispered the words Jack would never forget. "Phase 2 begins now." Jack staggered back, his entire world collapsing in on itself, because Phyllis wasn't just helping Matt, she was working with him, manipulating both Jack and Victor from the shadows, and suddenly every comforting word she had spoken, every tear she had shed, every promise she had made felt like nothing more than a carefully rehearsed performance, and the realization that the woman he trusted most had orchestrated the biggest deception of all cut deeper than any betrayal he had ever known. Meanwhile, deep underground, Matt wasn't broken anymore. He was smiling because Phyllis stood before him, no longer pretending to be the loyal ally, no longer hiding behind sympathy or concern, but fully embracing her role in the war's final act. And when Matt laughed, it wasn't the sound of defeat, it was the sound of victory, because even in chains he had outplayed them all. "You told me Jack would fall for it," Matt said. "And he did." Phyllis crossed her arms. Jack needed to believe he was still the hero. Victor needed to believe he was in control. "And you?" Matt asked. Her eyes darkened. "I needed revenge." The truth was finally revealed. Phyllis had never forgiven Jack for the times he had chosen business over her, for the secrets he had kept, for the trust he had broken, and when Matt approached her months ago with a plan to dismantle both the Abbott and Newman empires from the inside, she didn't hesitate, because while the war looked like it was about power, money, and control, for Phyllis it was always about betrayal, and now she was delivering it back tenfold. Back at the ranch, Jack felt like he couldn't breathe as the reality set in, because this wasn't just a betrayal, it was personal, and when Victor ordered his men to locate Phyllis immediately, it was already too late, because she had vanished without a trace, leaving behind only chaos, suspicion, and the terrifying knowledge that Matt was no longer powerless. Within hours, shocking headlines exploded across Genoa City. Secret Newman files leaked, Abbott financial records exposed, family scandals brought into the light, and every revelation traced back to one source, Matt's contingency plan, activated by Phyllis herself, and suddenly the peace everyone thought they had achieved collapsed into full-scale warfare once again. Because the enemy wasn't behind bars anymore, the enemy was everywhere. Jack confronted the destruction with a haunted expression, his voice cracking when he finally admitted the truth to himself. "I didn't just hand Matt over to Victor. I handed him the perfect opportunity." And Victor, standing in his darkened office, staring at the chaos spreading across the city he once controlled, realized something even more terrifying. This wasn't a war for power anymore. It was a war for survival. Because when the person you trust the most becomes your greatest enemy, the battlefield isn't the boardroom, the streets, or the prison cells. The battlefield is the heart. And in Genoa City, hearts were about to be shattered forever.